thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us today.
No, thanks for having me. Sorry about Wednesday. I got myself totally confused with these time zones I managed to do.
Not a problem. Not a problem. Mate, I've had a chance to sit down and watch Here Are the Young Men, and I've got to say congratulations. This is a fantastic film.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate it.
So tell us a little bit about how you became involved with this project. Were you a fan of the novel before you actually set out to work on this screenplay?
Yeah, I was actually. I came about it in a funny kind of a way, whereby I'd written a book, um, and I was nominated for an Irish Book Award, and I was very excited. And then because I did that, I decided to read all the other books that were in the category, because I was like, I should really see what the other books are, what I'm up against. And then this producer friend of mine, Will Ritchie, who produced the film, asked me to produce my book into a film, and I said I don't want to do that because I read this book, which is Rob Dahl's book, Here the Young Men, and I was like, we actually have to make this. So when I went to the book awards, I basically made sure I became friends with Rob and got him drunk, and I was like, hey buddy, I was like, neither of us won, and I was like, I know this is terrible, but what do you think if I just turn your book into a film? That might make it feel better.
What was his reaction to that? Like, it must have come out of left field a little bit when a rival author for a competition that you're both in comes to you and says, hey, I want to make your novel into a film.
Yeah, I don't think he was expecting it, which is probably why he agreed to let me do it. I mean, that's the best. That's the best way to get anyone to do stuff creatively. Take them by surprise. Give them a few drinks, and then next thing you know, you're making a movie.
So, what was it about the novel that made you decide I need to turn this into a film? Was there something about it that just really stood out to you?
Yeah, you know the way. I mean, you must get this because you know the way when you read certain things and you just hear music in your head. And there was something about the way Rob writes in this novel that just kind of appealed to me in terms of the pulpy aspect of the music, and it just made me think. I mean, obviously the title, but it made me think of Joy Division and Primal Scream and Chemical. But as I was reading it, it just felt gritty, and it felt like there was a really important moral story to it, and it felt cinematic. Now the book is incredibly dark, but it just seemed to me that there could be something really interesting to say in a film with this, and I was really interested in just what I could do from a musical point of view, and I just found myself I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I was like, I have to make this.
Yeah, it is such an important film, and I think that darker element to it is one of the reasons why it is such an important film. When you sat down to work on it, how did you make sure that you captured that darker element into it?
So yeah, I mean, I'm glad you say that because I think it's an important film, because I think there's an awful lot of sort of moral issues in it, which I think are important for people to see and consider. Toxic masculinity and just kind of the choices that young men make, which even though the book is set 20 years ago, I think are incredibly relevant, if not even more relevant today than they were then. But at the same time, I didn't want to make a film that's like, oh, this is what this is about. I wanted to make a piece of cinema, so from a musical and visual point of view, it sort of counterbalanced what the dark story was about. Because even though it's a coming of age story, it's still a very dark story within that. So that was the balance I had to find. Try and make something really interesting and and I almost wanted to mislead you by kind of getting you sucked in by some cool visuals and music, and then be like, oh, this is actually what this story is about.
You've got an amazing cast as well that you've been able to put together for this film. Did you have some of the cast in mind when you actually first started to work on the screenplay, or did that come later on?
No, that just came later on. Everyone in the film I just met for coffee. I mean, I met Dean Chapman first. I needed to find Matthew first, met him. Once I met him, I knew he was perfect for it. And then I found Finn. I tried to balance the cast because you want to get the chemistry right. So I met Finn, realised Finn was perfect for Carney, then same with Anya and Ferdia. Travis Fimmel, your fellow Aussie, was one of the last to come on board. And I didn't know Travis for the film. We spoke on the phone, and he had these crazy ideas, and I love him. And then he was, he was obsessed with the script, and he came over and we did it. And he was the last piece of the jigsaw, to kind of come on board.
How did Travis' name get thrown into the mix? Because it's such an unusual role for him. Like, we've seen him play a Viking, of course. We've seen him play a drunken father before, but we've never seen him kind of play a almost psychotic television host. Where did his name come into the mix?
I know. You know what? If there was a late night TV game show where Travis Fimmel was a psychotic TV host, I would watch the hell out of it. I don't know how he hasn't been cast out before. He actually heard of it from someone else who'd been reading the script, and then he read it, and then we spoke, and I was a massive fan of Travis. We've become really good friends since, but I didn't know him at the time. And I just loved his ideas, because of that character, I very much wanted somebody to inhabit it, and he brought an awful lot to the character that I hadn't expected. You look at his dress sense, that's all Travis. He's an incredibly visual and clever actor who just kind of is very instinctual. And with someone like Travis, you just kind of let him play.
Yeah. We talked about the darker elements of the film before. Working with this young cast, what was that like, sitting down and talking to them about that? I mean, you would have to have had a conversation about characters being slightly obsessed by murder and stuff like that. How did you have those discussions with the young cast?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I had to have discussions with all of them. I mean, for Anya, obviously to talk about the fact that her character goes through something that's quite possibly destructive and as upsetting, and that was a very sensitive thing. We wanted to handle that with her character and make her as empowered as possible, and make it a really important counterbalance to the boys. With Ferdia, it's an important conversation to do with kind of the depression element. With Carney, obviously being a sociopath, it's a very strange and difficult character to embody. I think he did that brilliantly, but it's wanting to. I think we looked at a lot of stuff like Romper Stomper and Bronson and that kind of thing to sort of find the right elements. And then with Dean Charles Chapman playing Matthew, his character was the center of the film, and he's got to go through all these crazy weird drug hallucinations, and which is something that he's like, how do I go through this? We have to kind of really talk about it and kind of research and find sort of almost this guide of what the character would be like when they're under different periods of kind of like abuse and so forth. So yeah, it was drug abuse, but it was difficult. It was difficult.
You mentioned the tough scenes that Anya had to go through. As director, how do you help an actor or an actress through a scene like that, but then also how do you help them afterwards? Like, it must be tough to switch off after a scene like that and go back to your hotel room or go back home.
Yeah, I mean, I think it helps because I'm an actor, and I hope so, and I think I try and understand it in a way that I'd like to go through it, because I think acting can be really emotionally difficult, because you're putting yourself into a situation that you would never be in real life, and it does stay in your belly for a while, and that might sound silly, but it does, because you've had to bring your psyche into something. So it's kind of very much about having the conversation of how the actor or actress, what their technique is and how they want to deal with it, and giving them space to be able to explore it safely, and then giving them space to perform it, and then just kind of finding that environment where you all trust each other, and then making sure that everyone's kind of comfortable, and then you get to play and be artistic.
One of the other things that really hit me about this film as well was one of my favourite movies of all time is Trainspotting, and I know that Danny Boyle finished that film and people were saying to him 10 years later, we want to know where these characters ended up. I get the feeling that this film is going to be like that as well. Would you ever go back and revisit these characters to show where they were in 10, 20 years' time?
That's an interesting one. I hadn't thought about that before. I mean, hey, if in 10 years' time I can have the same cast and making a sequel, then hey, why not?
Is it something you think about, though, as director? Like, did you start to think about that? Like, where would these characters be 5 years after the film ended, or a decade after?
I haven't. It's funny. I haven't really until you brought it up now. But now I think about it, there's a huge amount you could do. So I haven't really. Because the way I kind of made the film was that I really wanted people to finish the film with a kind of a subjective idea themselves of what they think was the right choice that the characters made, which I think would probably influence how you would see the characters in the future, right?
Yeah,
Depending on what side of I don't know about you. How did you? It depends on what side of the coin you feel Matthew lands on, whether what he did is right or wrong. And determine.
Exactly, yeah. And did you, like, going back the other way, did you actually find yourself when you were writing the film sitting down and thinking about where you were at that time as well and putting some of that into the film as well?
Yeah, definitely. We shot in a lot of locations, actually, that I grew up in and in the school that I went to school in. So I tried to bring in elements of my own experience when I was like 15, 16, 17 into some of the character of Matthew. Obviously, it's far more extreme and I haven't gone through that, but tried to make it as grounded and real as possible in that, and tried to remember what it was like when I was that age. So yeah, there's definitely elements. I think in every character that you write, me anyway, there's elements of you in those characters.
Yeah.
So they kind of feed in, and you kind of bring in your own experiences to a certain point through the writing.
Music was a very big part of it too, and I'm a huge music fan, so I love the soundtrack that this film had. Tell us a little bit about why music was such an important part to you with this film as well.
Well, I had a lot of the music predetermined. I had a huge big playlist, and had a bunch, about 30 songs, and about 5 or 6 of them I was unequivocal had to get, which was Chemical Brothers. The song about the one in the nightclub, Where Do I Begin? That's like one of my favorite songs of all time. So for me, it's also a kick. They were the first band I ever saw, and it just fit the mood. So I'd collected or found all these various indie bands over a decade before. Like one of the bands, there's this song from a band called Once Upon a Time in Communist Russia, who don't exist anymore. And I had to get my musical supervisor to source them and find them. And there's all these various songs like that I was like, this is what the film is. So getting Slow Dive and Primal Scream, and there's some cool Irish, like Fontaine's DC and Russangiano family weren't big at the time. Now Fontaine's DC are huge. At the time they were just starting. So for me, the music was really important to getting the tone of the film, and it's also really exciting because you're like, this is cool. I can get this music and put this in my film. This is great.
Do you have that nervous wait when you go to your music supervisor and say, I want this track, and then there's that nervous wait to see if they can get the rights to that track?
Yeah, 100% true. When we had to, we had to know that we had Joy Division ahead of time, and you're like, can we do this? How much is it going to cost? Are we allowed to do a cover of Joy Division? I was like, I don't know. So yeah, that was.
Wow. Well, mate.
Well, I think we actually had the Joy Division cover because my music composer, American guy Ryan Batesta. We only had this song because he obviously wrote a version of it and had to produce a version of that song. We only got that the day before because we didn't know until the day before we were shooting this. We definitely were allowed to sing that song.
Well, mate, I know we're running out of time very, very quickly, but I wanted to finish with one quick question. Here Are the Young Men and Till Death are both opening here on the same day, coming out on Blu-ray and DVD. We're in lockdown, so a few people are probably going to be having a double feature of your films. How do you feel about that?
As they should. Yeah, that's what I'm going to be doing. No, I know it's odd timing, isn't it? And I'm in Australia at the same time as going. I mean, look, hey, that's one of the COVID has pushed everything back, and now it's sometimes these things timing works out. So hey. It's a Friday in a lockdown. I may as well watch them, right?
Definitely. Well, Owen, I'll let you go, mate. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us. It's been an absolute pleasure, and congratulations on these 2 brilliant films.
I appreciate it, mate. Thank you for talking to me. Have a good evening.
Not a problem.